we've heard lots about you in the past 3 weeks on the radio, tracking your progress as you made your way all the way around the Isle of Man. I can't even begin to comprehend the sense of achievement and probably relief of finishing something like this. How did you get on? Was it as you expected?
In some respects, it did go as expected. The time it took was roughly what I'd imagined. There were the interruptions from the weather, which I assumed there would be. But in many respects, lots of surprises, many of them quite wonderful, like all the wildlife I saw, particularly all these encounters with these extraordinary, very curious seals that I met in different parts of the island, but birds, fish, less cuddly jellyfish, all sorts of things. I didn't expect all of that. I knew that the Isle of Man had a reputation for having taken relatively good care of its inshore waters, but I was really delighted to have a chance to see what that actually means, particularly as I'm supporting the Manx Wildlife Trust here and got a flavour of why their marine conservation work is so important.
The bit that was difficult to capture, as you were coming into your last few hundred metres, we watched you come up the final bit of the west coast of the island, surrounded by, I don't know what the collective noun is for seals, but several following you, very curious. It was really quite a fabulous scene and difficult to capture on camera as well from the shore. So you had a bit of an entourage, as we said yesterday. They were obviously very keen on what you were up to.
Yes, so meeting those seals at that point was actually, it wasn't just quirky, it was quite a psychological boost. I've run into different groups of seals at different points around the island, but this group almost certainly some of the same animals I met on day one when I got into the water and was immediately pursued down the coast by this group of seals, one of which ended up by actually hugging me with its flippers. So I think it must have been part of some of the same group, and I was thinking in that place where you spotted me, where I was actually stuck for a while in an eddy, a sort of localised current. This is actually the same place where the first person to swim around the island, Mercedes Gleitz, in 1930 got stuck, although she was coming the other way. And she got out of that in part through being reinforced by people on the shore singing to her, repeatedly belting out Ellen Vannin and the Manx national anthem. I didn't get that, but I got the seals instead, and I think that did it for me, and I was able to crack on.
I'd have given a rendition if I'd known, but I'm not sure you'd have heard from. But were there any points at which it was looking like you weren't going to finish?
There were one or two points where I had doubts about it, particularly a couple of tough swims down the east coast from Port Sodrick to Ronaldsway, where I thought the tide was going to push me along, and actually the reverse happened. And then around Langness, which is an absolutely fabulous bit of wilderness, but I just had this very intense experience where I was almost simultaneously being stung in the face by a lion's mane jellyfish, pushed backwards by the currents, and also I had a seal, in a very friendly but I have to say distracting way, gripping hold of my foot with its mouth and actually bite me, but they sometimes like to examine things with their chops, and I was just thinking all these things happening at once is just a bit intense. But yeah, I got through that, and then much of the rest of it was rather more straightforward.
We must talk about your support, of course, because you had Steve, was it, on the kayak, kind of tracking you around, some support from on shore as well. I'm going to presume that it wouldn't have been possible without these people.
Absolutely impossible. It would have been reckless to get into sea without some kind of support. And real blessing, because the two gents in question, Steve and Lee, they did this on a voluntary basis, extraordinarily generous with their time, which, as an aside, I'd say is one of the things which has really struck me about being here most of the past month. People here are very kind, but particularly generous with their time, I find, in small ways and very big ways, like these guys, which is quite a contrast to where I live in London, where everyone is constantly rushing around. So yeah, they've been essential, and not just because of the safety support, but also the immense local knowledge they have, particularly of tidal flows. And much as I would encourage people to get in the sea more, around the coast of the Isle of Man, where you've got these tidal streams coursing around all the time, you do need to do a bit of homework in places, because otherwise it is quite hazardous.
I definitely saw evidence of that at the point of air as you're about to finish, just at the very sort of tip of the island. I mean, you got through it, but it was I mean, in my lack of naval knowledge, it's effectively two tides meeting, and you can see the visible evidence of that, and it obviously proved very difficult swimming for you. But you seem to do enough research that you were equipped for these things as you came to them.
Well, only up to a point. I was very reliant on the knowledge and insights of my friends who accompanied me in the kayaks. I wouldn't claim to have mastered that myself. That point at the very tip of the island, at the point of air, was a nasty surprise because we knew that there would be a very strong tidal flow coming up from Ramsey, but we expected it to be arriving about half an hour later. But what was extraordinary about it was that as you were observing, obviously I could feel this in the water. There's a point you really could put your finger on it. Not that I could pause and put my finger on anything, so I was sort of scrabbling to keep going. But you really could put your finger on the point where those two tidal streams clash. Absolutely amazing. It's as though somebody has like lifted the sluice gate on a dam or something, or you're trying to swim up a river in full spate. You can't. And I think somebody on the shore who perhaps had just sort of wandered in or fallen into the water at that point would be in all sorts of trouble if they didn't have any support. You'd be whisked off in the direction of the Isle of Withorn in no time, I'd have thought.